when they plant these forests of trees like this, the primary function was to conceal the war crime. That's why you choose these trees, because they're pine trees, they're fast growing and they're evergreen. So they quickly cover up the war crime. They're planted by this organization I've mentioned before, this Zionist charity, the Jewish National Fund. The Jewish National Fund's role here is to enforce the dispossession of the refugees and to enforce a war crime. Much of the money that was raised by the Jewish National Fund, tax deductible money that was raised, charitable money, was used to plant these forests. Now there are 3 destroyed villages up on the Carmel mountain, that's why there's a forest there, just like there was here. And Israel had planted a thick forest up there to conceal the remains of the destroyed villages. And because these trees are highly flammable, they're not really suited to these very dry conditions in the summer. You may remember there was this huge raging forest fire up on the Carmel mountain next to Haifa. It was on the TV, and Israel was really frightened that Haifa was going to burn down. And Israel learnt a very painful lesson there, and I think it's been applying that lesson since. So forests like this have been really thinned out, because in a sense they've served their function. Israel isn't too worried about concealing the war crimes now. Most people have forgotten about that. They think it's history and an old story. I told you that the new immigrants that moved into this moshav here were from Romania and Bulgaria. So for them, most of what they're looking at would have looked fairly alien. They wouldn't have seen palm trees and olive trees and all these citrus trees in wherever they were coming from, Romania and Bulgaria. These pine trees would have looked much more familiar to them, much more homely. So there was a psychological element probably to planting these forests as well. Now, a last part of the equation to be thinking about when we think about these forests is also they're very aggressive trees. There are Israeli studies, an academic who wrote a very interesting book trying to compare the relationship between the trees, what the trees were doing and what the new immigrants were doing. They're doing something very similar. They're both Judaizing the land quite aggressively to dispossess Palestinians. And it's interesting, these kinds of trees, pine trees, the pine needles, when they fall to the ground, they acidify the soil, making it inhospitable to other kinds of plants. There were olive trees, there were citrus trees, there were nut trees, pecans, walnuts, almonds, cherry trees, pomegranate trees, carob trees. See any connection between all those trees? They're all produce bearing. They all have something that you can eat. And this was actually a vital part of the Palestinian diet. So if Israel strips out these trees, takes them away and plants these useless pine trees, it's also depriving them of an essential part of their diet, of their ability to subsist on the land. So in all these different ways, it was making life very difficult for any refugee that tried to get back, found there was no house. If they entered it, they were likely to be shot, and there was nothing to live off. Not only was there no house, but there was nothing for them to sustain themselves.